Please won't you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts together find their way into the heart of God this morning. Amen. Our worlds can grow dark so suddenly. We had a certain plan for our lives, and just like that, a new reality we didn't plan on takes hold. Your beloved walks out of the house for the last time. The doctor says, "I'm sorry, there's nothing more I can do." You drop your last kid off in her dorm room, and the house is quieter than you expected it to be. A policeman arrives at your door. A verdict is read. Something comes out of your mouth that you cannot take back. Your boss calls you into the office to inform you of the restructuring. You lose a dreamed about baby to infertility or a miscarriage, or you had a much wanted baby and suddenly you are too sad and numb to imagine your child's future or yours. You say your final goodbye to the wife you promised to love till death do you part, but you never thought she'd go first. Barbara Brown Taylor calls the darkness a time in which you can't see where you're going. In some way, you are given the news, and it changes everything you were sure of. The dark slows us down. It even stops us. Our tools we brought in with us, like Benny, are rendered useless there. You brought your map, but you can't see it. You brought your light, but it's broken. You have a compass, but you can't see it. You have a book, but you can't read it. You have a plan sketched out. You can't see it. The dark can be disorienting at best and terrifying at worst. Amen? No wonder we are too quick to flip on the light switch at Advent, straight to a Christmas people, right? Mary Oliver says, "Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift." There is much to be learned in the dark, and much growth that can happen there if we are brave enough to accept it as a gift. I met with our Ranny the other day, who's sitting back there. She told me that she wouldn't come up and testify, but that I could tell her story. Is that still true, Ranny? Yeah? Can you hear me? She can't hear me. Yes. Okay. She hates public speaking, but I love it, so I can tell your story. Ranny has been sick with cancer for about a year, as some of you know, and she almost died 3 weeks ago. She had a bad reaction to the medicine that they gave her at the clinic. In fact, she thinks that she died and then came back. She was at the cancer clinic getting her chemo and was suddenly plunged into the darkness. And doctors and nurses and EMTs rushed around her trying to revive her. And somehow her heart went on and she returned to us. Thank the good Lord in heaven. Can I get an amen? Yes, that deserves clapping. Somehow her heart went on. Dying is easy, she said to me. Living is what's hard. And I want to live. I'm a stubborn old broad, and I am far too stubborn to die. For the first time, though, Randy wasn't afraid of death. She felt God's presence there somehow in that dark place. God guided her feet into the way of peace that day. She received it as a gift. The scriptures are full of the word will, right? A word that we associate with not yet. A word that we associate with promises like the ones we make on our wedding day. I will, and you will, and we will. And in the Hebrew scriptures, God is the promise maker. Take off the garment of sorrow and affliction, O Jerusalem. God will show you splendor everywhere under heaven. God will give you the name righteous peace. God will bring your children back to you. God will lead Jerusalem with joy in the light of his glory. By the tender mercy of our God, the light will break upon us. It will come from on high, and it will break. God has, God can, and God will. That's what our scriptures promise us. And the biblical writers were no strangers to darkness. They were living in the time of great darkness. They needed the reminder of who God was, the promise that God was still with them, and the assurance that their hearts would go on, that they would walk on the journey, that God would walk on the journey with them. It's unfortunate then that the darkness is so often used in our scriptures as a metaphor for sadness, for evil, for ignorance, and fear, because darkness is also in our scriptures where the whole world is created. God spoke light into the darkness. The darkness was there first. Darkness is where seeds are planted and regenerate new growth deep in the earth. God buried Jesus deep into the womb, the deep, dark womb of his mother, Mary, where he emerged 9 months later to save the whole world. God resurrected Jesus out of the darkness of the tomb. Life is created and recreated in the darkness. And darkness is where all of us begin, intricately woven in the depths of the dark earth, knitted in our mother's wombs, fearfully and wonderfully made. It is also where we will all return back into the dark earth, where we will become part of all that is once again. I was introduced to Kate Bowler through her writing when I read her essay in the New York Times a few months ago. Maybe some of you read it as well. I immediately picked up her book called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved, and I read it in a day. It is so good. You should all pick it up. Kate Bowler is married to the childhood love of her life, who still makes her laugh and swoon all of these years later. After living off of ramen noodles with her husband for years as a perpetual student, she got a professorship at Duke Divinity School, her dream job. After a long period of infertility and a devastating miscarriage, she finally had a baby boy who is their sun and moon and stars. And together they bought a house and filled their days doing work they love, anticipating waking up to the giggles of that sweet boy. All of Kate's dreams had come true. She and her husband were fond of taking long walks and planning a seemingly endless future, which could only get brighter. #blessed. Yes? And then at 35, she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer and was given a matter of months to live. Suddenly, her world grew very small. Kate would leave everything she loved about her life far sooner than she had planned. Kate won't see her toddler grow up. He won't remember what she smelled like or what her voice sounded like. Her husband's bright future will no longer have her in it, and her interests and studies will die with her. Kate still describes herself as an incurable optimist on her website. She is a professor of Christian history, and she has written the only book on the history of the American prosperity gospel ever written. Ironically, she studies the group of folks who believe that the more faith you have, the more God will reward you, bless you with health, wealth, and happiness. #blessed. Prosperity religion is a heresy, and it's a toxic lie that poisons our country. Amen? However, we are all of us, susceptible to its allure, whether we go to a church that preaches it or not. We so badly want to believe that if things are going well, that is because we are somehow blessed by God. That's why our faith is so easily the first tool to go when we are lost in the dark. Right? What a tragedy. We forget that we worship a God who doesn't protect us from suffering and who also doesn't leave us alone in it. A God who promises that when we've lost sight of the path ahead, only love is what remains, still, and that this too is a gift. 2 months after her diagnosis, Kate Buller wrote this: "Cancer has kicked down the walls of my life. I cannot be certain I will walk my son to his elementary school someday, or subject his love interests to cheerful scrutiny. I struggle to buy books for academic projects I fear I can't finish, for a perfect job I may be unable to keep. I have surrendered my favorite manifestos about having it all, managing work-life balance and maximizing my potential. I cannot help but remind my best friend that if my husband remarries, everyone will need to simmer down on talking about how special I was in front of her. And then I go on and on about how this is an impossible task given my many delightful qualities. Let's list them together. Cancer requires that I stumble around in the debris of dreams I thought I was entitled to, and plans I didn't realize I had made. But cancer also ushered in new ways of being alive. Even when I am this distant from Canadian family and friends, everything feels as if it is painted in bright colors. In my vulnerability, I'm seeing my world without the Instagrammed filter of breezy certainties and perfectible moments. I can't help noticing the brittleness of the walls that keep most people fed and sheltered and whole. I find myself returning to the same thoughts again and again. Life is so beautiful. Life is so hard. I remember Shelley Kennedy Leonard looking up at the walls of cards that she hung around her before she died last year. "Robin, look at how much love there is out there for me," she said. "I wouldn't know about all this love if I hadn't gotten sick." She brought me to Drumlin Hill. Do you remember the story, to George's Hill, in Lancaster? And she described it to me in every season. She said, it never stops being beautiful, Robin. It is always peaceful. You can see deer here in the meadow and the calliope of fall colors in the fall, and the kids sledding down the hill in the winter. And if you come here early in the morning, the mist rises up off the hill, and it is like a magical heaven, and all of creation is in concert with God, she said. And when I pray here, I just feel deep in my bones that all will be well. That's what she said to me as she was dying. All will be well. I am sure of God's love just because of all this beauty. Life is so beautiful. Life is so hard. God's love was the only thing she was sure of. And she knew she wasn't alone in the dark. So there is a line from Isaiah that we read at this time of year that says this: "The glory of God shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together." All flesh, all human bodies. God doesn't promise us health and wealth and happiness. God promised us to show up in the flesh. God promises all flesh shall see the glory of God together. Amen? Kate Bowler says that what saves her every day is the ability to touch and be touched. Since she got sick, she just craves hands to hold, back rubs, hugs, human touch of any kind. The weight of people's hands, she says, on my shoulders and my head feels like I'm being put back together. Do you know that feeling? Life is so beautiful, life is so hard. And when the old tools we carry no longer work, touch. Grab a hand, give a hug, use your hands to knit or make a meal for someone else, or your feet to march or carol. Put some skin in the game. Do you know what I mean? We shall see God's glory if we are willing to wait there in the dark together. Amen.